Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Lucy and I share videos on the topic of long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome and mind-body approaches that can be helpful for these conditions. So today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about my story of being unwell and some of the details around my symptoms and when I was unwell, and also what I thought of the mind-body approach before I actually fully believed that it applied to me. And a few people have asked me specific questions about the details of my illness, and so I wanted to create a video just to explain a little bit about my situation when I was unwell. So I'm just sharing my own personal experience. Anything I say in this video is not medical or mental health advice. So I initially had symptoms before I got long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome. So I had chronic pain from the age of 12, and the way that would manifest was normally that I would get an injury. So it might be a legitimate injury in that I was doing sport and something happened, or I jumped off a wall and hurt my ankle. But what was abnormal was that the injury would then last for years, and the pain would stay. Sometimes inflammation would show up in scans. So I couldn't really figure out what was wrong, and I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2012. And at the time I was diagnosed, I was just told this is an incurable condition. I was told that by more than one doctor. Anytime I looked at any leaflet about fibromyalgia, I just saw that it was really depressing, and it started listing lots of symptoms I didn't even have, or issues I didn't have, which I didn't want to think about. I didn't want to think maybe I'll get these symptoms. And so I just stayed away from looking at things online. I didn't try to find any solutions. It was easier for me to just try and live my life as best I could with the pain and manage it myself in whatever way I could. So I couldn't do the sports that I really wanted to do, but I could do other sports. So I had to adjust what I was doing in that sense. But I could work, I could socialize, I could lead a relatively normal life. I also had food intolerances, so I couldn't eat dairy, I couldn't eat gluten, I was reactive to sugar, and my diet was quite restricted on a regular basis. Because of this, I couldn't just go to friends' houses and eat what they were eating. I was constantly monitoring my diet and trying to figure out what would help. And so I was sort of constantly in a trying to fix myself situation. Even though I wasn't putting lots of time into it, I always felt there was something wrong, that my body was overreactive, that I was oversensitive. If I went to a physio, I was often told that there was something not right with my nervous system in terms of how tense my muscles were and how tense my body was. So I got long COVID in early 2020. So my initial COVID infection was mild. I had trouble breathing. I had pain in my chest when I was breathing, heart palpitations, fatigue, generally felt unwell. And those symptoms just lingered for a very long time. And they did slowly improve with time. I was able to go for short walks. I was able to work to a limited extent. And I took good care of myself. I was trying to help myself with meditation, breathing exercises, eating well, and I did improve with time. But once I improved, about a month after I would say I had no symptoms, which was about October 2020, I then started getting symptoms again. And at the time I had a number of stressful things going on in my life, so I went into denial about having symptoms, or that I needed to help myself, so I took no time off work. So by 2021, I had become significantly worse. I wasn't able to work. I wasn't able to do my shopping. I could go for a very short walk at the start, and then I was unable to go for walks. And I needed to move from the UK to Dublin so that my family could help me. And when I got to Dublin, I got worse. I was unable to wash my hair. I was unable to walk around the garden. I couldn't go down the stairs. In terms of the symptoms that I had really bad orthostatic intolerance where I couldn't sit up for long. And if I was sitting for 10 minutes, I'd need to start holding my head up with my hands because it just felt like the weight of gravity was really pulling me down. I had migraines, especially if I did more activity, I would get a migraine. So if I was to try and wash my hair myself, I would get a migraine. If I walked around the garden, which I tried a couple of times, I'd get a migraine for a number of days. I had really severe fatigue. I had a lot of brain fog. My cognition was impaired, so I couldn't look at a screen for very long. I couldn't read for very long. I couldn't speak to friends on a phone at all. So I felt very isolated and it was very challenging. I had really severe pain, especially when I got my period, and even just getting my period could cause me to get significantly worse symptoms. I also had more intense food intolerances, so I was becoming sensitive to other foods. I felt like I couldn't digest food properly, and I was sensitive to light. I couldn't go outside without getting a sort of reaction to the sun, whether it was that I couldn't handle the light or if it was a warm day and there was direct sunlight, I would get a rash on my skin. And if I started to feel worse, normally I would feel it in my head first. It would be like a migraine, and it just felt as though I was crumbling from within. It just felt like my body could not hold itself easily at all. I think fatigue as a word to describe these conditions doesn't really help people who don't have the condition to understand, because it's not really tiredness in any normal sense. It's more like your body is shutting down and your nervous system feels very dysregulated. So even though I was incredibly fatigued all day long, I couldn't sleep during the day. I was able to sleep at night, but it would take me a good while to get to sleep. So I spent the year of 2021 mostly in my bed. I was able to get out of bed to walk to the bathroom, which was just a few steps away, and I could sit up to eat my meals. And otherwise I was really limited. I couldn't go to friends' weddings. I couldn't really socialize. I couldn't do very much at all. And at the very end of 2021, I was prescribed a medication called Low Dose Naltrexone, which did help. And in 2022, I was then able to walk around the house. I was able to go for short 15 or 20 minute walks, and I got less migraines. So I was still lying down a lot during the day. I was still limited in being able to go to events or go to friends' weddings or do normal day-to-day activities. I was very far from being able to work. But the change of being able to walk around the house and maybe watch a bit of TV, listen to an audiobook, listen to a podcast was really great, and it felt like a huge relief from the previous year. So at the end of 2022, I'd say that's when I really bought into the Mindbody approach. So I read Dr. John Sarno's book, The Mindbody Prescription, and I used IFS, internal family systems, as a way to get in touch with emotions that I was previously unaware of which some were driving my symptoms. So that was when I had a big shift in terms of what changed and what I could do. In 2023, I was able to go running. I started really small. I started doing normal activities again. It took me a while. It took a number of months. I still had a lot of symptoms, but I felt as though what I was doing was helping, and I was able to drive, I was able to start doing a lot more again. And before I came across Dr. John Sarno's approach, I was very much aware that our emotions could affect how we feel physically. I was aware that our thoughts and our beliefs would affect health. But I hadn't fully bought into it because some of the things that I read, I just didn't fully relate to. So for instance, Alan Gordon's book, The Way Out, is a really, really great book and I would recommend it. But it doesn't talk much about repressed emotions. And I read that a number of months before I read Dr. John Sarno's book. And I couldn't relate to it in the same way that I related to the Mindbody Prescription, John Sarno's book, simply because it didn't fully match with my experience. So my experience was that I had anxiety around symptoms and activity at times, but it wasn't consistently all of the time. So sometimes I would feel optimistic, I would feel good, and I would feel motivated and excited about doing activity. And when I did activity, it would end badly. So I couldn't fully relate to the idea that anxiety was driving my symptoms because I didn't always feel anxious. And on a general day-to-day level, I didn't experience that much anxiety, stress, or depression. And this is possibly because I repress emotions. So this is all interlinked for me in terms of why a mind-body approach that doesn't talk about repressed emotions wasn't something I fully related to. The most difficult time in my illness was when my symptoms were most severe and when I was really socially isolated, and my stress levels were much higher then. So I was easily triggered. I couldn't manage normal situations cognitively or emotionally. And even when I did find the mind-body approach, for me, in some ways, it felt as though I improved very quickly, but it did take time. And I did have symptoms. My symptoms even got worse at times during that period. And it wasn't easy. So I was putting myself out of my comfort zone. The first time I went for a run, my body was sort of saying, what on earth have you done? I had a lot of symptoms afterwards. I felt very anxious afterwards, and those were things that I had to manage and learn to manage on a regular basis. And I also had to learn to think of my body as healthy and strong and capable and well. So there's probably a lot more I could say about my experience of being unwell. I now no longer have food intolerances. I don't have chronic pain that prevents me from doing activity. I don't have symptoms on a day-to-day basis that prevent me from doing activity or socializing or anything. But it has taken me time to get here. And I'm still working on some of the things that I knew were keeping me stuck. So I still have different strategies that I would use to repress emotions. That's something I still need to work on. There's various other things that I am still doing to make sure that I stay healthy and well. And even when I think back to how severe and how difficult it was at times, without a shadow of a doubt, I would say it's definitely the most challenging thing I've ever gone through in my life. And I think it can be hard for other people to really understand the suffering, both physical and mental suffering that people go through with these conditions. It's not easy when you're really unwell. It's not easy when you're trying to get better. It's a process that takes a lot of patience and perseverance. I really admire people who have been unwell for a longer period of time and who are still doing their best and trying everything they can to get better. It takes a lot. If you found this video helpful in some way, please like and subscribe. If you would like to join my Facebook group, there's a link in the description below. I also offer coaching, so if you think that you would benefit, there's a link to my website and a link to booking a call with me in the description. thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.